Hi, welcome to Conversations. I'm Bill Kristol. Very pleased to be joined today once again by my friend Mike Murphy,
Hello.
Republican strategist, consultant, Hollywood writer, producer,
Infuriated gadfly.
man of
You
all
name it.
parts. Right.
Good to be here.
It's good to have you. We've been discussing geostrategy and politics, artificial intelligence this morning, but now we're actually going to talk about something you know something about at least, and I pretend to, which is politics.
Right,
You've,
sure.
you've done a ton of campaigns. You've been a shrewd analyst, and I remember when I first came to Washington, one of the things I was most impressed by about you is I had all these hopes and dreams, and you told me reality. You've always been reality based.
I'm a dark cloud that floats over one idea to the next. But yeah, no, look, politics is the art of what's real.
Yeah.
So-
let's just talk. We both have our views on Trump. People can go find them in many, many places. But let's talk more about what is likely to happen in 2018 politically, and then we'll move to 2019,
Sure.
2020. So here we are. It's early February 2018. Republicans obviously control both houses of Congress. That's thought to be at risk.
Right.
What to look for over the next, 8-9 months till Election Day? What do you expect?
Well, the future's always unmade, and my crystal ball is badly cracked because I'm one of the geniuses that said, Trump's going to lose by a couple million votes. He can't win. Well, he lost by a couple million popular votes, but in the Electoral College, very narrowly, he was able to win.
Right.
And by narrowly, I mean the margin in those states like Michigan and Wisconsin, a little less in Pennsylvania. So what do we think? Well, I'm a big fan of, there are two theories of how to analyze this stuff. One is you look at the polls every 2 minutes. Oh, the generic ballot is
Right.
narrowed to 5.2. But polls are a noise
Trump gave
meter.
a good State of the Union.
Yeah, no, right.
like
The
one-
hair
one day
appears to be
story.
a little better now. New hairdresser, our focus group, Dr. Frank Lunt, says that the hair is connecting to Connecticut. So you can get caught into the micro noise, knowing that polls are essentially noise meters of what happened 2 weeks ago, too. And they're not unimportant, but I always start with the theory of kind of revert to mean a little. And if you look at historical norms, which, again, can be overrated, I always tell the joke, if Napoleon had nuclear subs, we'd all be speaking French. So the history thing can be oversold. But first off-year or midterm elections of a new president are historically tough on that president. There tends
Especially
to
when
be a-
his party controls Congress.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So historically, that's a 23 or 4 seat, average. I don't believe in getting into specific numbers. It's generally a bad thing. Second, how popular is the president? Normally, they lose seats when they're kind of average popular. If they're unpopular, it tends to have a magnifying effect. And we do know from averaging all the polls together that Donald Trump is the most unpopular first-year president in the history of polling, easily. There's nobody, he's first, second, and third place. So that is a bad factor.
And that's been pretty steady and
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
stuck.
unlikely to surge in the next 7-8
there
months,
could be
right?
a foreign intervening event. Martians land with the same hair and say, only he understands us and we're going to save the planet. But assuming normalcy, the forces are pretty bad. And then I think the key question is always, and this was a question a lot of people asked at the beginning of the administration, was, well, will he and his machine, his people, have the skills to leverage the ability to be president to become more popular? And I think we can now declare that experiment in 1 year over. And it has told us that the more he governs, often the more trouble he gets into. He does not improve. He gets more unpopular, at least with the 2/3 of the country that's very suspicious of him. Among the third of the country that likes him a lot, it just stays there. But it's hard to win national elections with a third of the country. So that means I think the headwinds against him, the normal headwinds, the revert to mean headwinds, the inputs that we've trusted through history are all pretty bad. Now, we've got, 9 or 10 months left. There could be other events. There could be new medications or, something, and maybe he'll improve. But if I had to bet, I'd bet we're on a path. And, privately, this is a view shared by most of the smartest number counters I know in politics. And I would even say some of the leadership in the Republican Party in Congress. It's better than right now. I think the handicappers agree the chance of losing the House is better than keeping. Now, there's been a little hope cloud lately because the generic question on polling about which party are you for has narrowed a little bit. But what narrows can move, and the tax cut had some positive and negative press. It's gotten a little better. The polls we're looking at now that are better are 2 weeks old. Now we're in stock market volatility again. So, we'll see. But I think it's more stacked against him than for him. You see the retirements, too. That's the other point I'd make. When in doubt, when people start choosing in their own career decisions, which guide a lot of Washington, too much in my view, to leave, You know, when you see a lot of people building rafts who have inside knowledge, who know their districts pretty well, and are retiring, that is a sign too of trouble. Last thing is energy, and this is probably the most underrated thing. Off-year elections, 88, 90 million people vote. On-year election, close to 140 million, and both rise with population. But there's a big delta. And the voters who vote in a presidential year but not in the off-year tend to be younger and more democratic. So Republicans have done well in the off-year because our grumpy old retired Army colonels all vote. And the Democrats do well in the presidential year because they get their millennials and poor voters show up, et cetera, et cetera. So the Democrats have spent fortunes trying to get those presidential year voters to show up in the off-year, and it's almost always failed, despite the mythology of Eric Schmidt and all the magic. This year, if you look at the special elections, which are a fairly good canary in the cage test, you had that massive turnout. So we got a pile of dead canaries from the first couple of elections. So it is likely that some of these presidential year Democrats will get engaged and show up, which is a thumb on the scale against us that could be part of the formula to cause us to lose in the House.
So more likely than not, the Republicans lose the House.
If I had to bet today, I would take money. I'd probably try to get slight odds, but I'd bet money we lose the House.
But still, the playing field in the Senate, so many Democratic seats up,
Yeah.
and so few Republican that you think Republicans more likely than not hold
It's
the
not
Senate.
impossible to lose the Senate, but I would be surprised. The problem is the opportunity cost, because kind of the McConnell's hedge, I think, was run up this year, we could win a couple of seats, ideally, to be ready for 2020, where the map reverses. It's kind of bad for us. Because if you get kind of the apocalyptic view of this, which I'm not sure is right, but I think is not uncredible, which is this is a big cycle of mediocrity. So Trump will implode, and then a progressive person like Elizabeth Warren, God forbid, is elected as the anti-Trump. We have a 10-year lost decade here. The Senate could be the hedge against crazy socialist ideas if McConnell can run the numbers up enough this year to survive 2020 in the majority. Now, this year may be a time in this environment where we don't win some of those places that we could gain seats with, and then we're looking at the meat grinder in 2020. So I don't think we lose the Senate, but my guess is we don't get to our full potential. But we're seeing.
And biggest extraneous events, I mean, obviously they're always the foreign crises. People forget the Cuban Missile Crisis had an effect on the 62 off-year election, and Trump could handle something like that well, or the opposite,
it could go either
obviously.
way. Yeah.
The Mueller report, I think that's underestimated in Washington, is my sense. I mean, this thing is going to happen.
Yeah.
We don't know what it will be, but something will happen in the summer that will be pretty, I don't know if it's decisive or dispositive, but pretty significant in terms of our knowledge about both the campaign and the possible obstruction of justice.
Yeah, I don't know anything inside. I hear all the rumors. I would just say this. One, I have a lot of faith in Mueller. I think he's Elliot Ness. I think he's wildly competent. And I remember from my experience when I was a consultant for Christine Todd Whitman, we had this kerfuffle where Ed Rollins had been out late at a party the night before and then did a press breakfast early the next morning and started talking about African-American ministers and turnout money. And next thing you know, I got FBI guys in my office. And I had the amusing, but not at the time, experience of being hauled in front of a grand jury and having the prosecutor waved my phone records in front of me. And did you call the governor at 8:01 the next day to commit a conspiracy? And we were all cleared. There was no there. But I got a little taste of the investigatory power of the government. Yeah. And it is the ultimate brute force operation. So I know that Donald Trump is going to go under an electron microscope. And everything I know about Donald Trump, and I know a fair bit about him, going back to my Jersey days when he was operating in Atlantic City, that's where I first kind of encountered him. He is one of the least likely people to survive an electron microscope into his life, I believe, and his business life of anybody. So my instincts are strongly that they're going to find some stuff. Now, I'm not sure what they will, what it'll be, the Russian connections, financial support to his enterprises. I mean, who knows? But there is a reason that his legal team is acting. I mean, the old Southern political saying, the guilty dog barks the loudest. And there's a lot of barking going on. So but we'll see. And I think it will be a big part of the inputs.
So, and that's, I guess, how does it play out? So let's just say enough is there that, a fair number of Democrats, not just a fringe, say we got to consider impeachment. We have to have hearings.
Right.
And the Republicans probably say in August, July, or September, whenever this happens, of 2018, no, not enough there, or certainly not. We're not going to do it now. So then don't you have an effect on off-year election that is kind of an quasi-impeachment referendum?
Yeah, I think totally.
Now, which party is that good for or bad for? Is an interesting question.
This is interesting because the Democratic strategist class, most of them, are all like, don't talk about impeachment. Whatever you do, you're going to activate the Trump thing, scare away the
It's
middle.
1998 where
Yeah,
Clinton
Oh,
bucked the
right,
headwinds,
right.
because of impeachment.
Now, meanwhile, if the ace card the Democrats have to win is that massive intensity that's organic, that they haven't created, Trump created it, but it's rising up, you can't control that. So if a memo comes down from party leadership to the 600,000 people in downtown LA marching against, the Women's March, which was really the subtext was anti-Trump, saying, hey, you can't be for impeachment, they're just going to throw it away, tear it up. So the Democrats really want to be tamping down their own forces when they can't control them. In fact, what they ought to do is amplify that intensity because that's their whole card and turn out to maybe win the majority. So I think it's an illusion to think they have the choice. I think there's no way the midterms won't be a referendum on Trump, and Trump will make it. He'll be jumping around in a bunny suit. Who knows?
Right.
But guaranteed that Trump will not cede the spotlight to anybody. So I think it will be about a referendum. I think they'll be clever when they finally agree they have to do it. It'll be fire Trump, fix healthcare or something, But it will be about Trump. It will be about firing, investigating, impeaching him. And I don't think it'll hurt him that much because it's what their wave wants. Though I think they're very reluctant to do it. I was on one of the morning shows and they had me next to Congressman Deutsch, Democrats, run their campaign committee, and Senator Merkley of Oregon. I asked them both, you going to run on impeachment? And they're hamada, hamada. No, never that, hamada, hamada. And Merkley afterward, who's a nice guy, was kind of like, I could just see his head calculating all the phone calls he's going to get from the activists in Oregon. What the hell do you mean you're against impeachment?
Right.
So this will be their conundrum. Our problem is we're going to run on a tax cut, which has some upside. We'll see. It has to be litigated. The real question is, will the economy heat up enough to cause wage growth? That is the thing people feel. That's why, we've got full employment now, which on paper looks great, but you take a poll up here, what's number one? Jobs in the economy, because they're not making any money in real spending power. And I don't know what else we're going to have to talk about. Maybe a big infrastructure plan. That's a lot of what the White House has to do in the next 10 months is come up with some stuff we can run on beyond the obvious. Pelosi's terrible.
I think the other question, and we'll move on from 2018, is if you're a swing voter and you're sort of anti-Trump, but you sort of like your moderate Republican congressman or congresswoman in Northern Virginia where I live, or in Philadelphia suburbs, or in parts of California, there's still, for all that it's a Democratic state, there are a lot of Republican, there are quite a lot of Republican members of Congress in California. Quite
a lot of Republican donors, too, are now paying higher income taxes.
Right,
So,
well, that's a problem.
That's going to be a thing.
But, do you think, my congressman has done a good job. I'm going to reelect him. That person's been there before Trump. That person isn't particularly Trumpy. Even if I don't like Trump, it's not a problem. I like some of the policies. Or do you think we need a Democratic House to check Trump? Which is the national message or instinct overwhelm the sort of local affection for your, repeatedly reelected member of Congress. I guess the history suggests the national wave
is always better.
Trumps.
Yeah, the calculating voter of, let's see, I'm going to strategically keep my guy on the post office committee. Well, it's basically, do we like the guy we got, or is it time to send a message? So historically, they've sent a message. And the tragedy for kind of pragmatic conservatives like me and you is that some of the people we admire most in the House are from some of the harder districts to win, and they're going to be the first casualties here. The first 10 to go will be 7 or 8 people that we think ought to be there, but they're in the toughest districts. So you can have a little bit of a delta where I don't like Trump, but it might be worth 4 or 5 points. But if you have a 10-foot wall of water coming, then I don't think it's as surgical as that. Now, maybe in the new era where we have the internet and so much more information and people study up, it could happen. It makes logical sense. But history shows people don't normally vote that way. They decide, am I going to send the president a flower, or am I going to, kick him in the ass? So
let's assume this outcome happens. How much does it change things? One could argue that either way. If you want to revert to the mean argument, Clinton lost everything in '94. Obama lost the House in 2010. A lot of hubbub, a lot of readjustment on the part of the Clinton White House, maybe less on the part of the Obama White House. Some changes in policy.
Right.
But ultimately, they both got reelected, and that didn't interfere in a sense with their
Right.
And the party didn't fundamentally redefine itself because of losing a midterm election. So
it was kind of business as usual. Okay, change it up.
Right.
Well, who knows? But is Trump as flexible as a Clinton or an Obama to adjust his course, or is he the atomic clock of what he is and will double down? his instinct so far has been to double down. Trump is, in my view, never left the Republican primary. It's all about the base. And the disease of the Republican Party is we treat base voters like swing voters, when in fact is you want to put the base under some pain to attract other people to get to a majority number. But Trump is my people. It's my people versus the rest of them. Give me a rally in Alabama. I'm going to talk to my people. So my guess is he'll just double down on that, and he won't make those adjustments. The second thing is if the Democrats win the majority in the House, from a Republican point of view, I think two things will happen. One is we will meet the Democratic caucus, which is they've got their cranks too. The Democratic House caucus is not the cutting edge of the best in the Democratic Party. So that'll be interesting how the country kind of reacts to them. Second, they're going to go hell-bent to impeach and harass Trump, and they'll have the power, the majority in the House, to do it. They will be able to, grab and drive the budget process. And the Freedom Caucus will be, they'll look like a parliament of Gandhis compared to the budget fights we're going to have. So I think it'll be very, very turbulent. And again, when the president sees opposition, he doesn't do the Clintonian thing of let the steam out and kind of meet them halfway and diffuse it to take their energy away. He goes right at them. So look, and this is all crazy speculation, but if I had to guess, and again, I've got a crystal ball, a huge shattered thing, having predicted Trump would lose. Yeah. But I will say, footnote, 2.9 million votes. We've never had an electoral college difference of a big loss like that. But if I had to guess, I would say the president will react badly to losing the House. And he will immediately blame the House Republicans for losing. If they'd only listened to me, they didn't build the wall fast enough, they're too tied in the swamp, I tried to save them, those idiots. In fact, I don't need any of these people. And he'll get back to the campaign where he kind of runs against everybody and isolate himself even more. And it'll be the D.C. swamp Republicans who screwed up, and now I got these Democrats. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump starts talking about running as a third-party candidate, because I think the party will react badly to losing the House, because the whole Republican apparatus, and I don't mean the establishment with striped watch bands, I mean the conservative establishment, the Ted Cruz establishment, the regular business establishment, everybody, it'll shrink. Congressmen are going to look at empty seats where their friends used to be. They're going to move into small minority offices and have no power. Some of them will be happy with that. They'll just put out press releases with conspiracy theories and stuff, but others won't. And the machine around it won't. And the party apparatus in the states that's kind of gone along with Trump, well, he's a winner. Well, not anymore. Now there's a cost. The analogy I use is the Tony Soprano analogy. If your mob boss suddenly, you're no longer getting paid and all your friends are going to jail, you decide time for a new mob boss, and all of a sudden Tony vanishes. So I think that could be the Leninist that Trump has turned me into. That could be the big event that starts to switch things. And Trump will feel that, and he'll react to it. And he'll react by attacking. So I think Trump isolated, talking about his Make America Great third party, I'm going to sweep them all out presidential thing, could be the news out of the election from Trump. That could be his reaction as opposed to the Clinton and Obama strategic reaction.
And you could have, I think, don't you think, the House Republicans will be a more conservative caucus?
Yeah, it would be down to the core
more
of the core.
Trump-y kind of caucus. They could double down on their conspiracy theories. The left wing of the Democratic conference will drive impeachment. I mean, it really could be quite a seat in Washington.
Yeah, no,
it'll
circus
make
music
this
will
year
go up.
look.
Yeah,
I don't know
what
what the implications of that are exactly.
Well, Civil War, I think, because some Republicans will say, "Oh my God, we're on a death spiral. This is terrible." Others will say, "I'm with you, Donald. Let's blow it all up."
Yeah, we just didn't go far enough.
Right, exactly.
We
they're by that
accommodated
theory.
Paul Ryan. We didn't. We got
arrest
betrayed.
them all.
We were betrayed by the Murkowski and Collins. I mean, it'll be,
exactly. We need a military parade every week. Why only one? And then the Senate guys who are looking at 2020 with a lot of guys, candidates up, are really going to freak out. Because
so talk about that.
Now
Everyone talks about the House, but
way.
what about the Senate Republicans are at a different place than the House Republicans? I'm struck by that when you talk to them privately.
Yeah,
they're like, oh man, we're making this work so far, and we're getting our judges, and we're getting some regulatory relief, and we're appointing some good people. Some of our buddies are getting jobs as assistant secretary for this and that, but it's
no. They're all doing the Franz von Papen thing, which is we can manage him. Wily, German chancellor. Yeah, he's a beer hall politician and he's a little crazy, but we have shiny objects we distract him with. Don't worry. But, you go to the meeting, there used to be 4 of those guys, and what happened to, there's an empty chair. Oh, it didn't turn out well for him. So the monster's breaking out of the cage a little bit. Right, they all act like Baghdad parking attendants. Their hands are shaking with the key. But they know, particularly if this year is bad generically and they don't get some of the wins that we ought to be able to get, that 2020 could be really, really bad. And also in the Senate, there are some ex-governors there. There are people who actually kind of want to get some stuff done. They actually, because they're all Supremos, talk to some of the other side. They know each other. It's what the Senate's supposed to be, the little more grown-up thing. Well, the House is, a hockey fight.
Right.
So I think, how they act is going to be interesting, particularly if the Dems are making big impeachment moves. They're thinking, all right, well, we can be the Trump defenders and swirl down the 2020 drain. Or if the Mueller report is persuasive enough, do a couple of them take action? I mean, there are a million scenarios, but the pressure on them will increase because their own political careers are going to look dimmer and dimmer into 20. So I don't know. I think, as you said, it'll be very combustible. 19 is going to be the biggest year in politics in a long time because 19 is the primary season for the who we pick in each party, which is on the first quarter of 20.
So let's get to that side of 19, which is the 20 election side of it, as opposed to the Congress side. I mean,
right.
I have this instinct too that things could happen. Even maybe in the Senate, for all the bipartisanship is dead. Couldn't Susan Collins and Joe Manchin and people get together and decide that they want to work together and be an alternative to this terrible Trump versus House Democrats fight?
Well, you could have a unity caucus. I mean, this is right off an Alan Drury novel.
Those are excellent novels, which I want to recommend to
everything.
all of our viewers.
These are all ancient.
They were great, though. I loved them when I was a kid. I don't know.
You should really pitch Geritol as a sponsor because this whole thing is like, kids, there's a TV network called Dumont, and it had all the
Ed
best
Sullivan
shows.
show.
Yeah,
right?
no, exactly. You've modernized things. It's now in color here.
Barely.
Yeah. The idea could be that, all right, the House have gone impeachment crazy. Do 4 or 5 of the Gang of 8 break away and declare they're going to be independents for a year and try to have a new Senate leader to navigate that in some unity caucus?
Split the chairmanship.
Yeah. It'd be great drama. Now, the institutional world would blow up, but you got some 70-year-old patriots there who may not run for re-election in 2020. So I don't know. The bottom line is it'll be combustible, and laying on top of it will be the presidential primary, and both parties will begin.
So let's just one last point on the congressional side.
Yeah.
What if they hold that? What if Republicans, keep a missile crisis type situation, handle it well in October? I think that's true in 62. They came back and won 10, 15 seats they weren't going to win.
Right.
I think people now think, and they hold the House. So there you are. Trump says, you know what? I got all these enemies. Everyone's going after me, and here we are. We lost a few seats, but we held the House. We held the Senate.
Right.
What's the dynamic then? Just more of the same kind of at that point?
Yeah, I think so. There's always inertia just to break into the same. We've got trench warfare because that's what the incentives are. One side's watching one cable TV channel, tells them they're right, especially in prime time. The other's got its own channel around the clock telling them they're right. And it's the kind of fun sport of just slogging away.
Don't you think the Democrats go a little crazy, though, of having had this fantastic chance to win one of the two bodies? I mean, Bush won back the Senate and held the House in 2002, post 9/11. And I don't think it's an accident that Howard Dean took off in 2003. The Democrats, who everyone had assumed were going to be a very establishment, Clinton, Gore, alternative to Bush, suddenly Howard Dean is the front runner, and really was the front runner for quite a while. The Dems really could go further left
I think a lot of the
they
energy
fail in 18. It seems
right.
to
Well,
me.
one, there's a symmetry to it. There's going to be the force of Trumpism. There'll be an anti-Trumpism, which is some of the same grievance politics on the left in a different way, without the big racist stuff that Trump does. And then there'll be, disappointment if the dream doesn't come true. And then it'll be, you saw a flash of it over Schumer when it was perceived they lost the shutdown thing. And that'll be sweep them all in. So some of the new-faced Democratic candidates, like Dean was, I think generically have some support, let alone if there's a perceived, Washington super failure of some kind, because expectations. The other problem with polls are, the way the news business works is they're economically incentivized, particularly on television, but on the internet and everywhere else, to treat every day as the biggest day ever. Every day is the biggest day of the campaign. Every day is the biggest day of the presidency. So today, a new poll, Democrats might lose, in February. And then, the phones light up. And so we're in this feedback loop where nobody waits for the real thing. And the truth is, it'll just be speculation till then, because the only mark-to-market thing in politics is Election Day. Everything else is hot air. So the truth is, we kind of have to wait.
Yeah. Okay, but I think we do
Says
agree.
a hot air merchant right here.
Well,
but yeah.
say, I believe that's called a conversation and not hot air.
Yeah,
you
no,
know.
true.
The,
We're at a rarefied thing here in the secret location.
exactly. But the day after Election Day 18, it will be a new moment. I mean, everyone now is navigating this congressional thing. And I personally feel it that way. I sort of like this person to win, but maybe it'd be better if the Democrats won the House. But on the third hand, I'd like the Republicans to hold the Senate because they will confirm some good judges. And it's like it's confusing for a lot of time. You know,
there will be
not
a
confusing,
massive new reality.
But it's suddenly you're looking down the pike at 2020, and it's a different world.
It'll pick up the whole thing and turn it upside down, and there'll be a lot of breathless screaming on what happened when it's actually kind of, you can see it coming, and it'll have a traumatic effect on the Republican Party and the president, and how they react to that will be the story on our side of 19, and how the Democrats react to it will be the story of what the future of their party will be.
So let's just begin with the Democrats, just because that's so undercovered. I mean, how the conventional wisdom, I would say, among our friends in Washington is they're going left. All the energy's on the left. It's a little bit of a reassuring thing for Republicans and conservatives to tell themselves, because it makes the Democrats seem less electable, perhaps with a less electable nominee in 2020. Do you buy that? Is that what happens necessarily?
Well, I think the progressives have the ideological muscle now, and you see it. But I think more than anything else, I think people make a mistake in presidential politics where they look at candidates when really look at what the voters are looking for. I call it the wave. So there will be a big progressive wave. Now, who rides that wave with their surfboard? Is it Bernie again? A lot of downside there. Is it a new Bernie? Is it Elizabeth Warren? But that is out there, that force, and that'll find somebody ideologically. But I think the bigger thing is they're going to want a fighter. They think Trump is a street fighter. Trump has done this kind of Rasputin mind trick to him, which is all the polls. Nate Silver said I was going to lose and I won, so poison doesn't work on me. I can't be killed. You see that now. Yeah, they're going to win the midterms. I mean, Trump has a great Jedi mind trick on the media and the left that he's this super invincible guy. Which I think is all bluff, but mark to market. Wait for the voting, we'll find out. So, some scrappy, even House person comes out of the impeachment hearings. I think the power for a non-Washington face, I think Eric Garcetti, the mayor of L.A., is underrated because he is a telegenic new face from the West. Nothing to do with Washington. He's generational. I think he will have a moment. Now, whether or not he can ride that moment to the nomination is a big question. The second look at what he's done in L.A., not that impressive. But he's the fresh new wave, which I think could be very powerful. But whoever they are, they're going to want a brawler. And then you got Biden, who's sitting in polls now at about 20% because everybody knows him. That's a pretty weak number for somebody everybody knows. But he could be the fighter. So I think progressive is only one factor. I think fighter is even bigger.
Which is contrary, I'd say, to another version of a kind of revert to mean sort of argument, which is you always select the person who's the opposite of the incumbent you don't like. And so Democrats will go to a calm, reassuring, steady hand on the wheel to reassure the public after this turmoil of Trump. It doesn't sound like you...
I think that's more the Republican thing. To kind of get over the lost weekend here, this has been very exciting for Republicans. Maybe a little less excitement, which is why I've always thought Romney on paper could have another bite at the apple. On the Democratic side,
I want to come back to that, and not just leave that floating out there. But let's stay on the Democrats for another 2 minutes.
I told Mitt I'd shut up about that. Not that he has any plan to do anything other than be a good senator for Utah.
Yeah, of course not. We have to end this in about 20 minutes, but you have a
I have nothing to do with it. I'm a top secret call with him.
No, what's the Utah area
Fake
code
news,
there?
Bill.
I see.
Fake news.
Right.
But the Democrats, I think, will want somebody who's a fighter.
And don't you think generational? Maybe I think younger. Do they really want?
So I don't think they want the super competent, because they think that's what they always offer and lose.
Right.
We always have the polite, nice. They want face ripper McGee, who's also acceptable to the progressive wing. And the primaries will create that candidacy, and we don't really know yet. It'll be wide open, I think.
It could be someone young and someone. I think the one point you make, I myself agree with. So I'll repeat it. But I mean, people look at the current name ID. Well, it has to be one of either someone super well-known or famous or super wealthy so it can self-fund. I don't buy that at all. It could be someone we barely... I mean, Howard Dean really could be Howard Dean who wins, it seems to be, could be, or Jimmy Carter. I mean, it does happen sometimes, right?
I think it can both be true. It's an advantage to be what we call in Hollywood a pre-aware title. which is something pre-famous. That's what Trump was. Even if all he did was teach Gary Busey how to work a snow cone machine on TV every night,
Totally.
it made him the can-do guy. So that is a big advantage now. Oprah, that is worth something. But the process itself is historically designed to elevate somebody to superpower. And the impeachment moment in 19 for a crusading Bobby Kennedy type prosecuting Democrat or a candidate out on the road doing it who is compelling and new, that is rocket fuel for somebody. So there are different flavors of rocket fuel. I do think you're going to need rocket fuel. You're going to need moments to be that's the person.
And I suppose if impeachment fails, either in the House or no conviction in the Senate, you could also imagine a Howard Dean type rebellion against this leadership of either the House or the Senate. Dean rebelled obviously against the Iraq War vote cast by Kerry, Clinton, and everyone else.
The more they punt or fail, the more an outside Washington Democrat, I think, and that's why I have my eye on Garcetti out in California, will be attractive.
Interesting. Okay, on the Republican side, so there's Trump. He's, let's assume, they lose the House but hold the Senate. He's sitting where he is in the polls, 40% general, 38%, but 65, 70, 75 approval among Republicans. I mean, is there a significant chance of him being denied the renomination?
Again, I think it's more likely he'll be driven from office and not run than any other scenario, or he'll get tired of it. I want my old meatloaf recipe at Trump Tower. And remember, he can save face by this third party thing. He can say, I'm foregoing the Republican process, don't need it, we're going to build the MAGA party. And buy your new red hat because it now has a special flag on the side, 1995, made in China. And then he'll announce his streaming network he's going to carry his campaign on, and he can get back in the fun stuff. Then he can say, unbelievable, the swamp fixed it with both parties to rig the ballot so I can't get ballot access because they knew I was going to win and they're afraid of what we're going to do together. So I'm not going to run because they've denied it and we all knew I'd win. Everybody knows I'd win. And so instead I'm going to pick the winner with my endorsement. The media will fall for this and cover him every minute. And he'll be back to being the biggest voice in the campaign but no responsibility. So I actually think that could be an exit strategy for him. But assuming I'm totally wrong and he runs again, I think a Kasich or somebody may try to take him out in the primaries. My guess is he'll slog to a victory, not Kasich, but Trump. Even in the damaged state he could be afterward. Maybe others, but I think probably not. And then he'll be the nominee, and my guess is Democrat will probably prevail. If you rerun, in 2020, if you rerun the election we had, just on demography alone, he'd lose.
Yeah.
So let alone if he'll be in worse shape, which I think he will.
Yeah,
and the party will be divided. There could be an independent protest candidate at that point. There are a million permutations.
I want to get to the independent possibility in a minute, but on the Republican side, it seems to me there's a Kasich scenario, Romney, someone will run. I think that's probably true, because even if only 15 or 20% of the party's against him, that's not nothing.
It'll be a reverse Ashcroft.
Yeah, at least
Nixon.
It will be Ashcroft-Nixon.
Yeah. Or McCluskey,
Could be McCarthy against Johnson, depending on how the world looks. And McCarthy looked like a protest candidate who became a real candidate because the world moved in a certain way in 1967 and early 68.
And it's always more fragile than Washington thinks. Washington always assesses people, but it's always got to be a senator. It's the little guy from the state can never. When in fact, the whole thing is built on graham crackers, and if you catch the public imagination, in a time of tension, stuff can happen. So it's a very shifting sand kind of environment. But I don't know if Kasich, as much as I'd vote for him in a primary against Trump, but
I'm not sure
I'm not sure he's that thing.
And that's relitigating 2016 in a way, which if you could design, which you can't, the candidate who could most likely take Trump on in the primary, I think it would be someone who wouldn't have been never Trump like us. It would be someone who voted for him, tried to work with him maybe if he were a member of Congress or a governor, was cordial, reached out a little bit, conceivably someone who even worked in his administration at some remove, but just says, hey, look, he did some good things. I respect him. I'm not one of these guys like Murphy and Kristol who spend all their time.
You're shattering my secret plan.
On Twitter.
I was going to file in the New Hampshire primary under the slogan "Eliminate the Middleman" and run for president. You've talked me out of it.
We can still do that.
Yeah.
But that could be a diversion from the real candidate. No, the real candidate, wouldn't it be, I don't know who this is, but someone who's sort of more in sorrow than in anger, says, we just, and I do think there's a certain number, I've run into people like this in the last couple months. You say, are you pretty happy with Trump? Yes, Bill, you're too harsh, blah, blah. We got to give him a chance. Are you fine with another 4 years after? Let's assume these first 4 work out adequately. you want another 4, he'll be 75. Oof, geez. I mean,
Yeah, no, it's fatigue.
So you could get, this is like the Nikki Haley scenario. I'll put a name on it, and not that I want to make clear, as you admit, I have not discussed this with Nikki Haley. You know, she resigns in 19, having done a great job as UN ambassador, and sort of Trump makes a couple of errors, and there's a draft Haley thing, and you know, she's worked loyally for Donald Trump. She's not some lunatic who was anti-Trump, but we don't really, can't we get a little change of course here for this? You know what I mean? That would be an interesting scenario. It's a little tricky to pull off.
It's sort of the inside-out thing, kind of. Now,
right.
Look,
it's like the coups are always, the successful coups and military dictatorships are usually led by someone who was part of the regime, not by the...
Right.
Well, not usually, but sometimes instead of
acceptable to make the pitch.
Yeah.
I do think post-meltdown, if we lose the House, will be a Trump taint. And so
that
I
cuts
think
the other
that's
way.
the other
that's
way.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Now, so I think, but
that's good. Okay, that's better for your candidacy then. So
yeah. Well, no, I'm planning to.
I'll be campaign chair, man. It'll be huge in New Hampshire. It'll be unbelievable.
We'll make a funny documentary, and then I'll wind up in jail somewhere. But watching the military parade being, in a steel cage being driven down at the end behind a particularly flatulent horse. President personally ordered this.
Trump looking at you, you know.
The problem with the parade is we're going to have to come up with a Trump salute. I think it's a hair swirl thing. Like, Hail Caesar,
there won't be a parade, right? Would you bet right now? This is the news of the week. So
the President of the United States orders a parade. How do you stop? I think it'll be... Hopefully, it'll be in the Pentagon parking lot and go around twice, and and
it'll be November 11th. They'll make it kind of 100 years after the end of World War I, so it's not really a pathetic Juan Perón Trump parade.
Yeah. But the other way in an anti-Trump thing could be grown up versus drama, and it's like, let's get back to competence again. Particularly if we have some foreign policy near misses, because right now it's all opportunity cost. TPP was an incredibly big geopolitical defeat, I believe.
The trade deal, terrible.
Yeah, because it was a political deal to isolate China, and Trump and Hillary ran against it as a Chinese trade deal, biggest lie in American politics. But let's say we have an artillery duel in South Korea, forget the nukes, and Trump lobs a cruise missile into their sub base where they're trying to build a missile sub, and some Norco general throws a couple of shells at Seoul, and we have one bad day, so it's not a nuclear disaster, but there are 500 dead South Koreans, and there's red alert everywhere. You think the stock market's, the whole chip, our modern economy, the production footprint in South Korea is tremendous. The disruption would be huge. Just the fear of it, that would take a couple thousand points off.
Literally, people have not really thought about what would a 6,000 point drop in the Dow look like in one day.
I know really shrewd investors who carry heavy currency hedges on South Korea just for this thing, because nobody's figured out that the microchip production footprint there, particularly for memory, is enormous. So, and that's the whole world supply chain. So anyway, we have a couple of near misses where it's like, oh, thank God he was at Mar-a-Lago, and the generals were able to make the plane not take off for 2 days and handle this.
Right.
That could hurt. Or we have a win. One of the best things you can say about the Trump administration, and as a critic, I say this all the time, he's done a far better job crushing ISIS than Obama ever did. Much more success, objective success. Now, I think it was more an output of the Trump administration as a thing. He turned the military loose to do what they do. But still, you got to give him that. So maybe, other things will happen and he'll get credit for. So you can't
Or North
rule
Korea,
out.
we could have a lucky, we have a lucky or successful thing. The place collapses. We do have some pinpoint strike.
We avoid a war with China when it does collapse. I mean, a couple of moves they have to make there. But yes.
So,
bottom line, though, is he's a phenomenally unpopular president under political stress. That generally doesn't work out well for second terms. But in between now and then, a million unknowables.
But you think on the Republican side it's as likely the steady old hand becomes the alternative to Trump as opposed to generational change, young Nikki Haley,
those
young
forces are all
Ben
there.
Sass.
So, and there's no lack of ambition. I think, like a pack of wolves, if they smell enough weakness, a bunch of them will jump in. So I don't really see the lone Kasich challenger theory, because if he's strong enough to scare everybody out, he'll be strong enough to beat a John Kasich. But if he's weak enough, either driven out of office or the third-party meltdown thing, or he's limping through, then a bunch of wolves are going to run. I think you're going to have an old grown-up wolf, which the economic forces will like.
Mitt Romney, let's just say.
Well, I've said the Romney scenario just because right about Putin, right about Obama, right about Trump. And he's no drama. A nice, boring presidency of competence. But I don't think Marco Rubio has lost his map to New Hampshire. Tom Cotton.
That could be
Pence, there are a bunch of these guys who would think, why not me?
Yeah. Be something to have a multi-candidate challenge to an incumbent president. But again, we're not used to it, but of course it's happened, and 68 did have Bobby Kennedy getting in once McCarthy showed he was vulnerable. I think that's a very good point you make. People kind of assume, I've been in so many discussions of this, just people sitting around Washington, especially anti-Trump people, what's going to happen? And it's all like there'll be a moment where everyone decides, well, this is the Trump alternative, and then everyone else says, okay, well, that's the decision. He's announced, and then everyone else goes away as if Ben Sass and Tom Cotton and six other people can't
get in third in New Hampshire.
Right.
I'm sure Kasich is thinking he's McCarthy. I can beat Trump in New Hampshire. That's all I got to do. I'll drive Trump from the race. Yeah. But the shame ray doesn't work on Trump. But the embarrassment, if two guys beat him there and then beat him somewhere else, then it would flock. Because Trump right now rules by kind of, they don't see another scenario. The minute another live scenario pops up, particularly if we lose the House and the machine has been badly harmed, and careers have been harmed, it's all career over country apparently now, then I think it could fold really quickly.
And some senators start announcing retirements, and the conventional wisdom is, oh my God, the Senate's going to. Right. So much for all the advantages of having Trump appointing conservative judges at that point.
So the most likely scenario, I think, for 19 is we have the Chinese Civil War with the 20 warlords running around, and it's complete chaos. Panicking senators, impeaching Democrats, Trump even more unhinged under all the pressure, Melania with her divorce team and the tabloids fire with that, 14 guys hanging around New Hampshire thinking about running, Democrats smelling the presidency, having an epic battle between the socialist wing and the more pragmatic wing. This thing is going to be 1968.
So if you have that degree of chaos, that feels right to me, and I think it's also contrarian in a good way in the sense that people are much too, having had a bunch of fairly normal elections, re-elections, 04, 12, 96, pretty well, except for 96, two-party races, conventional, incumbents moderately popular, so he wins, it just feels to me like we're ready for like a 68 situation.
Yeah, just all the forces there. And then what if we have an economic, the cycle continues and the economy slows down a little? The other thing is we're heading for some, God, I sound like such a doom and gloomer. I'm ultimately an optimist about the country, but we've been solving every problem like Democratic appropriators. We're spending money like crazy. The tax cut was expensive. This new budget deal, if it goes through, will be expensive. Entitlements continue to compound. So what happens when we start looking at real fiscal issues?
And interest rates go up.
And interest rates normalize, and we can't afford to fund the deficit anymore. So there's this halcyon moment we're in is not guaranteed, and it could hit during the 1920 cycle when things start to revert to mean and we have real problems.
Yeah. Well, so that reminds me of Ross Perot, who went from nowhere. Yeah. You forget how nowhere Ross Perot was in in the equivalent to, this would be the equivalent of 1990. I was in the Bush White House then. We knew each other then. He was a respected businessman.
I kept trying to say, we could lose, and I remember getting thrown out of the building.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, that was in 91. Yeah. But at this point, it's not even 91 yet. Perot was not even particularly politically active, as I recall. He was a great sponsor and backer of veterans and, a kind of philanthropist and a very successful businessman. But if you had said Ross Perot was going to be leading in the polls in 92 against George H.W. Bush and some serious Democrat, and then drop out, then come back and still get 19 million votes, people would have, which does raise for me then the independent candidate question. If it's not so much chaos, and if 2019 is in the voters' minds, a slightly unhinged Trump administration on the one hand and a slightly unhinged Democratic House in total, warfare and gridlock and, terrible, rhetorical fusillades both ways. Isn't there more room than usual for an independent candidate in 2020?
Your point about Perot is a good one, because that's why I say look at the demand, not so much the candidates, because the demand will find somebody, and then whoosh, up they go. And then the media amplifier finds them, and it all reinforces itself. There's a tremendous appetite for an independent path, and there's been for a while in American politics. Generally, when we have a big wrong track election, people are unhappy. They go find a George Wallace or a John Anderson. That there's somebody. Now they never get majority vote, and one of the problems they've got is it's kind of like a French vanilla ice cream thing. It becomes a niche deal, but there's energy for it. The problem is our system is very, very aligned to two parties. It is hard ballot access. Now, some states
ballot access is more manageable, having looked at this little in 2016. If you gave me $20 million on January 1st of 2020, I think you could do ballot access.
I would take that bet. I've looked at it too. I think
Well, you
you could get on a lot of
million.
states. Well,
Yeah.
Bloomberg looked at it too and
Yeah.
thought it was potentially with unlimited resources.
And Perot got on every state, basically.
But don't underestimate the ability of the incumbent political system to make it hard.
No, and they'd have
Legislators
to go to court.
can
You'd have to go
pass
to
stuff.
court in
You
North
got
Carolina and
elected-
Texas. You have a couple of states that are very early.
And you got
difficult
partisan
range.
attorney generals. I mean, just
I agree. You'd have to have a
anyway,
massive.
So let's just say we disagree. It's either hard or extremely near
Right.
impossible, somewhere in that spectrum. So that's the problem. And then the second thing is, all right, you win, you go to the House, and you tell the Republicans and Democrats to put themselves out of business in an electoral college vote.
Right. So you have to just win 270 votes, which is hard.
Yeah, I'm working on a startup idea in the blockchain voting area because that'll allow internet voting to actually work, which hasn't worked yet. They tried it in Estonia. Putin kept winning because it's easy to hack. But the blockchain technology and cryptography could make it work in the future. And once you have that, you can start to break down the distribution rules and have it. But in the short term, even though there's a huge appetite for it, I think it's hard to make happen. So I think there probably will be one. Whether or not it can be successful to win for plurality in our current system through the Electoral College, I can't see it. But I've been wrong before. One day it'll happen because the demand will be met. But we need a few leaps and some changes in how the self-interested parties that run this now for themselves, how they can be forced or evolved into a thing that opens up the channel.
To make it work, you think
Trump could be it, though. Again, I still think Trump could be the big third-party person. Then it'll be interesting because the Republicans, some of them will want to put him on the ballot, and the Democrats will all not want to.
Right.
Although the Democrat strategists argue split the vote is fine.
Yeah.
So, again, part of the 19 chaos. What's the pragmatic point of view on that if he tries
And
to?
if the if the ballot access turns out to be somewhat manageable, you start launching lawsuits in 2019 that knocked out a couple of the earliest obstacles and the biggest numbers of petitions you have to get and stuff.
Right.
What kind of candidate is the best alternative to Trump and the likely Democratic nominee, assuming Trump is the Republican nominee? Is there a...
Well, in times of stress, there's always an attraction for a highly competent technocrat. I don't think the Bloomberg thing is over. He'd have one more in him if there was a path, I think, just as an observer. I've done work for them on some pro-Republican stuff they've done. But I think, somebody like that, the business savior, there are probably 8 or 9 CEOs who think they ought to be president.
Right.
It's funny. I think I said this on last time we talked, but out here everybody talks about Jamie Dimon, and out in L.A. Bob Iger. But savior it's kind of the Wendell Willkie model.
Right.
And then, maybe somebody who has a political movement they think could turn into a third party. That would be the argument for Trump if he tried to be a third party person. Bernie, incredibly, could do it. It would fail for all the same distribution reasons, but it would be real if he did. They got a following. The thing I worry about...
you need a big issue, right? Or you don't need one, but it would be helpful.
Or identity politics. That's the other way. Somebody tries to do it like that. I think that glue will be a little weak in a third party, but it's credible. It's there's an argument, too, that as dysfunctional as our system is, the majority two-party thing forces coalition glue, which is not a bad thing. I've worked in Latin America where literally the beer brands run somebody and finish 8th and 14th. There's 17 candidates and you win of 23% of the vote, and then it's slap fights in the legislature all the time. So I'm not sure the multi open the door totally to multi-party is a good idea. But being able to mount with a certain threshold that you really have to prove you're real, a third-party thing, I think there's a huge appetite for it. I just don't see mechanically how you get it done in the short term.
But I'm struck by the demand. I mean, more and more people say they're independent. They don't like the party. Yeah. The parties could look worse. I think this is an important 18 months from now than they do today. That's not so great today. But after 2019, if it goes sort of
I agree.
So that would be interesting to have.
Well, does somebody try to do a competing Republican Party? That's the other kind of interesting thing. The breakaway Republicans that are also Republicans.
Right.
And they try a third-party thing as part of a long way to...
So that's a little more Teddy Roosevelt, I guess.
Right, exactly.
But that probably just elects the Democrat.
Yeah. Almost all the third solution splits one side. And remember, the Dems now, the problem with the Republicans looking at every election like a primary and nothing else, that can win the general election in some states, but in most states it won't. And with demography, the Democrats looking at it like a primary can win more and more states, because the blue states have become even bluer. California is a good example of that. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that's part of the theory of the Democrats becoming more and more progressive, because that's the flavor inside their world at the time. But for us, it's the wrong lesson. for the Democrats because there are more of them. So many of these multiple party situations, the Dems have the biggest base in raw numbers, not in distribution across states. You saw that in the Trump Electoral College numbers, but in terms of, there's the thing, 3,200 approximately. I think it's 3,241, probably off by 10 counties.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and Hillary got all her vote from 170 of them.
Yeah.
61 million people, and they're all mostly the biggest counties.
Right.
And so that concentration thing is what's really changed in American politics. And what I've been surprised by is there was not more of a move on the Democratic side to start screwing around the Electoral College after Trump.
I know. I mean, they lost
make it
twice in 16 years.
Because it tilts our way. There's no doubt now that distribution argument, which originally was founded for good ideas about balancing power, has become a Republican advantage.
Yeah. Well, I'm struck.
So I'm fine with it.
I'm struck by the degree in which they're taking on gerrymandering. The courts now, or some of them, the more adventuresome courts, are willing to strike down gerrymandering. That's going to be a huge Democratic issue in the state elections this year. And some of these governorships could flip. I mean, that could make a difference too.
Long term, it's critical. That's been one of our great advantages, all the state houses we hold, and we've been pretty successful, though. Again, more dead canaries. You look at some of those Wisconsin specials recently in state legislative races where Trump districts are going the other way.
Yeah.
So, it's not, we can overcomplicate this. We got a really unpopular president, and so will his party take a pounding in the midterms? More likely than not, but we'll find out.
And reelection, if it just comes down to a surprisingly normal Trump versus, an average Democrat race. I mean,
well, I think the big
incumbents usually win on the one hand. On the other hand, Trump is more unpopular than a typical incumbent, and he barely won in 2016.
Yeah, so. No. I mean, the numbers in 2016, I think maybe we're retreading where we talked last time, but in Pennsylvania, my home state of Michigan, and Wisconsin, it was roughly 13,900,000 votes cast, those three states. His margin was 77,000 votes. I mean, it was one of these things, if 20 canaries had flown in a circle over Detroit and one traffic jam had happened, it could have flipped the other way. It was almost like a calculus thing where it's in a range. So will he be better next time? Will they be as bad as Hillary? My guess is not. So I think his reelection ability is really, really impaired. But maybe he'll change. I think we've had the year test, can he change? And we find, no, he doesn't change. In fact, he doubles down. So I think it's a pretty safe bet against. But again, I was betting against him last time and he did it. So the Rasputin thing, is out there. But, in the end, they killed Rasputin. So
I mean, I suppose if you end, this is so far ahead, it's kind of ridiculous, but if you end in 2021 with, a Cory Booker presidency or something and a Democratic Congress, I mean, people sort of vaguely assume, I guess I do, my world does, and then we're kind of back to normal. But that's not really true. Because then you have the massive fight about the Republican Party, and it's not as if everyone who supported Trump or Trump himself just go away, right? I mean, our problem was we didn't follow through enough. We were sabotaged by the swamp. We need a more Trumpy party on trade, on populism, on immigration. Against, we need to go back to Marco Rubio, Bush Republicanism or something. I mean, that would be a very...
No, there might be a third fusion of the new stuff. We don't know. But I will say this.
What do you mean by that?
It'll be populism with less of the Trump snarl. That populist strain, which has been around the party a long time.
Right.
But everything's cyclical, we're seeing. We'll see what the problems are. That'll drive the debate because we'll be in the business, hopefully, of having some solutions to it, and they could be fiscal. Now, the thing, though, I always remind people is we always talk about the Trump voters like they landed in a spaceship. There are these new voters. First, the media discovered the Tea Party. Where have they been? Underground caves. They came up. These are Republican primary voters. There are a lot of Trump voters who voted for Mitt Romney last time and George W. Bush before that and Dole or Bush before that or Pat Robertson. Yeah. So they're the same people for the most part. There are new young ones coming in. There are people moving in and out of politics. So it is dynamic. But the idea that these are robots that have one point of view for their entire lives. No, it's flavors, not unlike fashion. So I don't discount the fact that things can rotate. They're evolve, and the string of populism, the strain of it, the force of it is still there, particularly if real wages don't rise. That's what causes a lot of this. People working harder and not having in real money more for a decade or more. So, but don't forget, it's often... mostly, not all, the same pool of voters evolving through points of view. So they can evolve again. It requires intellectual leadership, though, and that's something the party has forgotten. We act like we're a minority, particularly in the House, even though we're a majority. We're always uncovering conspiracies or what's wrong. We don't do a lot.
With Trump there, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to sort of say, well, we're fighting leadership for the party, except we have the president and both houses of Congress, and they're ignoring you. I mean, I just think the reform conservative agenda, all these things that looked sort of promising, I don't think we were crazy to think they were promising in 2013, 14. Obviously, it's just been stalled.
They were promising as policy, but we're all politics all the time now.
Yeah.
That's what Trump has done.
They didn't really have a political angle on immigration, on
It'll be interesting. Speaking of immigration, we're taping this on whatever day this
February
is.
February 7th. I think,
And so it'll be out in a couple of days. But the big news today is close to a deal on the budget. They're going to put immigration aside.
Yeah.
And I read that headline, and every time I read a political headline in Washington, I think, what's Trump thinking over the breakfast McDonald's right now? And I'll bet he was looking at that. Wait a minute. I want immigration to be part of any budget deal. So I'll bet in today's news cycle, even though I'm sure McConnell sent the message, just do nothing, we got this thing, we'll have a vote on DACA, we'll get you your wall, he may blow this up because he's not in the middle of it.
Yeah, people just and again, it's just the volatility of each of these issues, the markets.
Yeah.
People generally have too much of it. I totally agree with this, a sort of a static view of where things. Having been surprised so much, we sort of still can't help, I think, as human beings, expect not to be surprised in the next year or two.
Right.
We sort of want things to revert to what we think of as normalcy.
Right. It's easier. And part of it is Washington is speaking its normal code language, and Trump doesn't speak or care about that language. I mean, I was calling it the screwball presidency, like a movie with pie fights, because that's what I think is really going on inside the White House. But Jeb nailed it back in the campaign. He said he's a chaos candidate. We're going to have a chaos presidency. And that's really what it is. So bet on more chaos.
On that note, appropriate note to conclude on, good sound advice from experienced Republican strategist and thinker about politics, Mike Murphy. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
I always enjoy this.
We'll do it again in a few months and correct all of our false predictions, and this tape will vanish from,
we should
from
make
the internet.
One commitment to our viewer Chet, which is if there is a military parade, we'll cover it live from a little box somewhere.
If they'll let us.
Yeah, if they'll let us.
Yeah, exactly. That would be good. We'll do that. That'll be a
Trump
special
Dragoons
conversation, with Bill Kristol, the military parade live.
Right, it'll be great.
Okay, I'll commit to that right here. And thank you for joining us on Conversations.